Thanks a lot to invite me in this event. I'm very happy to have this opportunity. Well, my presentation will be a little bit different from my colleagues because I'm talking about the effective implementation of the use of data. So I will focus my presentation on few successful use cases. They are very early use cases in the DECIDO project. So I'm talking about the Turin experience, but we will see later on experience in Greece and in Spain as well. So next slide, please. So my name is Fabio Perossini. I am the CEO of K-People Research Foundation in Malta. And we are mainly dealing about the social innovation vision linked to innovation. So our perspective is a little bit different from the technical people who talk before me. Next slide, please. So first of all, we in the DECIDO project, we are using data as explained also by Rafael and the other colleague as a real-world evidence. Real-world evidence is something coming from the medicine and is a wording that we think reflect exactly what we are starting to get from data in order to understand the situation. So data are for us a starting point. So they are in a way a facility in an overall process of policy co-creation, because DECIDO is dealing with policy co-creation. So the first issue related to data is their availability. And what happened today is that data are available. We have plenty of data. We have open data. We have public data, we have private home data, and we have specific data. So in this presentation today, we talk mainly about open data. But to be honest, we understood during our experience that sometimes very specific data are needed in order to improve policy and create the condition for a real co-creation with citizens. And often it happens also that we need private owned data. But in any case, the main issue is that we don't know at the beginning if those data are free from any privacy constraint. And this is a key point to me, because from the social innovation point of view, we have to bear in mind as a priority to protect and to improve the quality of life of citizens and not to create more difficulties and in any case infringe their right to for their privacy. I give you some example, because when we talk about data, we consider that personal data are subject to GDPR and privacy issue. This is real, but it's something is a condition to be considered as necessary, but not exhaustive, because we can collect for instance, from the chatbot or other stuff, we can collect indirect information, indirect data that could lead to have some privacy infringement. And this is something that it's very difficult to monitor, because each case should be analyzed as a single one. In this way, the prescription to have a DPIA in place for each specific data collection for us is very, very important, because it is important to understand if the data set we are collecting is able to be used in a non-proper way. So data availability is a starting point, but with that starting point, we know that we open a door for a big discussion that should be taken as a priority in each project. And in Turin, we are dealing with that, creating, suggesting to the technical partner in the DECIDO project, an architecture that we call an hybrid architecture. So simply, I don't want to go in technicality because I'm not a technical guy, but the solution found was to have an edge cloud in the perimeter of the municipality, and all data, so all surveys, all storage of data, which could drive to a direct or indirect personal data collection, is done exclusively inside the municipality perimeter. In our project, we have the EOSC participation, and we discuss with them the possibility to have this, let's say, hybrid approach in which all the information, aggregated information related to the project functionality will be kept by them. For those information where we advise the risk to have some privacy infringement, we keep them in the edge cloud. Then we have a dedicated server that is providing one of the services of EOSC platform, that is Amnesia. So data are going to be anonymized and aggregated. Only after that process, they will be available for the to the EOSC platform. Next slide, please. So what is the role of this data in our policy co-creation process? For sure, the first point is to try to understand the evidence from data collected or historical data. The second point is to consider data as a baseline on which build the new policy, so the definition of the goals, and use data themselves. Oh, what happened? Okay, to use data themselves as a facilitator for the definition of objective. But data are useful also during the implementation and monitoring of a new policy. I will talk about that in the next slide. And they are used also for the evaluation of results. And very important, they are important to define the potential impact and the pathway for the future. So what we use in what we are using in the DECIDO project is the policy life cycle. This is the policy life cycle that has been presented in the project. But when going in field and talking about the Turin situation, we decided to simplify it a little bit, because first of all, we understood that it's not so easy to understand this policy life cycle for people who are not used to work in this environment. And due to the fact that our main objective is to engage citizens, and we are spending a lot of effort, and to be honest, this is our first priority, and probably an heavy challenge to engage citizens. So we simplify, and we have 4 main steps. The first one is the agenda setting. In the agenda setting, we consider no, do not go back, please. Thanks. We consider the data collected, the historical data, the data collection, and the specific data collection. That means questionnaires, polling, all the initiative that could be done in order to collect data very specific about the needs, about how needs are faced today. Then there is a following phase, the policy formulation, in which citizens, starting from a brainstorming citizen together with expert and the public administration, they try to improve the existing policy or to create a new one. And then we have a phase in which, using a serious gaming approach, we are going to do the policy simulation in order to evaluate the results. Well, this policy implementation simulated is a phase that we introduce because the traditional policy life cycle include the policy implementation. Due to the fact that the DECIDO project is dealing with the policy co-creation and not the policy implementation, because policy implementation means political decision, means a large need for funds to implement the policy or radical changes. We decided to add this phase of policy simulation in order to be able to do a serious simulation and to do, let's say, a draft evaluation of results and a sort of validation without the real possibility to have a political decision that will change the policy. Next slide, please. Okay, this is the process we are using in Turin. In particular, this is the process applied in social services. I'm not going through the process, but simply to show you that the colors are related to the various phases of the policy life cycle, and we have the pink color is related to the agenda setting, while the yellow is related to the policy formulation, and the orange is the implementation simulation, and the blue is the evaluation of the policy itself. What we learn starting from this exercise that has been done it was a desk exercise done with expert and with the public administration. When we met citizens and we started discussion, we understand at least 3 issues. First of all, data usability. So data availability is not data usability. So what is easy for us, for people that are used to work with data, is not the same for citizen. Is not the same also for citizen expert of their own domain. So we are not talking about disinfringement citizen. We are talking about involved citizen, but they have not the IT technology, IT culture to access data. So this was the first issue. The second issue is the flexibility. So we cannot consider this flow as a rigid one, but we should have the possibility to go back, collect further data, do further analysis, and then start the discussion again. The third point is to find the right KPI in order to understand the evidence of the improved policy. And this is something not easy because when we talk about policy improvement, probably we talk mainly about qualitative improvement. So to measure qualitative improvement, we need to do some activity like survey or let's say a discussion. So it's not so easy to have a clear mind about that. Next slide, please. This is simply to go deeper in the concept of data availability versus usability. So for us, the priority, the very priority is to have access data. We found that data are available. There are several open data repository. We have EOSC in our consortium, so we know they have a lot of data. But the point is how we can access those data. So the issue of data usability is a key point because we have access to those data using different portals, different user ID, and also data format are not so easy to be treated. So the reality is that now we need an expert to pre-elaborate those data before to present and to use those data in a co-creation section. And this is something that in the future we need to, let's say, to improve, because it is for us, in terms of social innovation, this is an exclusion factor. It is not an inclusion factor. So having a lot of information, but without the possibility to have an easy access and an easy usability is not to be considered an inclusion factor. This is our opinion. Dashboarding of those information is complex. I saw the information provided by Mauro in the first presentation and the dashboarding. And this dashboarding, because we have something like that in Turin related to floods, but when I ask how it is possible to create this kind of dashboard, so if we are doing a co-creation, how we can do that, we discovered that at the end we need an expert to do that. The last point is the data privacy, as explained before. Because we need to have clear in mind the data ownership. So, for instance, all data which are not open data or are kept outside the view of citizen? Are we sure that those data are not data owned by citizen? This is an open question. Next slide, please. This is a citation of Mr. Stiglitz, and he said, knowledge is a global public good, requiring public support at the global level. So knowledge is a common and should be treated as a common. And this is not true. This is something that we have to work on. The public administration should support citizens in accessing those data. Next slide, please. Okay, let's go in deep in the Turin use cases. In Turin, we are by now addressing three themes and the related use case. So the first one is the floats, because Turin has 3 rivers, floats generated by natural hazard. In this particular framework, we have GIS cartography provided by the region and the municipality, and they are very precise. They have dedicated layers for the floats, but also for residential citizen, business activities, also all the escape ways. So it is very, very completed, and this is a starting point. It is valid what I said before. These data are available. There is a public portal to see those data, but it is not so easy to have data we need during a discussion. Then we have a civil protection procedure in place, because there is a city plan for emergency. And this plan is something that is periodically revised. So what we decided is to address the communication patterns between the civil protection and institution in general and citizen. Because it is important to understand that communication, when we talk about communication, we are not talking about a single way to communicate, because we have different categories of citizens, we have different cultural level, we have different social level, we have those citizens who are disenfranchised, so it's very hard to reach them. And it is crazy, but often those people are the most vulnerable for floods, for instance, because they live in houses that are not so well built. So it is important to improve the communication partners. The same is related to business initiative. We have a business initiative, and the communication to a residential person and a business initiative should be different. And we are working on that. So we started from the existing pattern, and we are discussing directly with citizens how this could be improved in terms of contents and also mean. So, for instance, in Turin, in the past, they were using faxes. Now they're using WhatsApp. But WhatsApp is, in a way, a single level communication. So you have simply, you receive a message, and probably we need to have a more sophisticated way to use the same mean, but in a sophisticated way. We are working on that, but we are collecting and we are discussing with citizens. And the main point is to have a sort of feedback mechanism. So the fact that you launch an information doesn't mean that the information has been received. So we are also studying a feedback mechanism in order to understand that the information has been received properly. Then the second area was the COVID-19 area, in particular the food distribution. There are existing procedure. The procedure has been improved, let's say, in an informal way during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now what we are doing, we are collecting all the information. And we understood, for instance, that there is a big problem is labeling constraints, because all foods have an expiration date, but the expiration date is not the real last time to use the food. So we are now working to have a sort of a labeling improvement, a dedicated labeling for the distribution of food, in which explain to citizens that although the food is close to the expiration date, they have 1 week more, to 1 week, 10 days, 2 days. It depends from one food to the other to use that food. So the third point was very, very new, the third theme, because in Turin, we are facing the asylum for Ukrainian refugees. And there was no policy in place at all, because the first point, we understood that historical data related to migrants were not so useful, because the type of migrants that are Ukrainian refugees are completely different from people coming from Syria, from Tunisia. So they are completely different. So the first point was really to try to understand where to have data about those refugees. And to be honest, the discussion is still open, because we had a couple of meetings, and we are now merging data from different sources in order to understand what is the real situation in terms of figures. But the other point is related to their needs. Their needs are very specific. For instance, they want to be they want to have a document very soon. So they are pushing, and this is something new, they are pushing to have their document immediately. So what we are doing now, I'm sorry, because otherwise I will keep, I will take too much. What we are proposing is to create a communication hub managed by Ukrainian people, like an online newspaper, in which they can merge all the information. Also information that seems not interesting for us from the city point of view, but they could be useful for them. And we are working on that. The second point is to speed up the regularization procedures, because at least in Italy, we are facing a delay in reaction to provide them those information. Next slide, please. So the approach we use is to let's say to use the Acaton approach. The Acaton is very well known in technology environment, and we are using a sort of social Acaton. And we started these hackathons with very, let's say, basic technologies, because the platform is not yet ready, but those those technologies and the approach followed is very useful to collect information and to fine-tune the final platform. And what we are using is the open discussion, and also the surveys that should be done at several levels. So in increasing the detail of questions in order to understand what are the possible solutions and which are the needs that we are going to address. Next slide, please. So, how we can run the hackathon? This was the first question, because we consider the hackathon probably the main point to do the co-creation. The first issue is the stakeholder engagement. And to be honest, this is probably the most difficult point, because it is not so easy. And when we talk about, for instance, the food distribution, it is very difficult because most of the people are disenfranchised, so they are not ready to receive any kind of traditional stimulation to participate. Then the second issue is to improve the capacity of people going to participate to the hackathon. So not discussing the theme, because that will be done during the hackathon, but we have to prepare them. So for instance, in terms of data, ask them what they would like to have in terms of information, and try to provide them the information they need to do the discussion. Then we are in the phase of performing the hackathon. So the first action is to the definition of the goals. We are talking about small objectives. So we are not trying to solve the issue, for instance, of Ukrainian refugees in a hackathon. No, we are addressing only the issue to provide them information about where they can go, for instance, to discuss with a psychologist that is speaking their own language. Remember that when we are talking about refugees, we are talking often we are talking about also fragile people, and we are not prepared for them. Definitely, we are not prepared, because they are talking a different language, and they need some specific support. So then we try to facilitate the creativity of those stakeholders involved in the co-creation phase. And then we go through a proposal, an assessment, and if needed, the further data collection, defining KPIs, so defining what kind of data we will collect later to understand if what we are doing is in the right direction. And then let's say, plan as much as possible further rounds in order to assess the formulation. Next slide, please. Well, this is something that in this session is in a way a counterpart, because this citation is related to Albert Einstein. And we strongly believe that knowledge is important, but imagination is more important. So what to do? starting from the knowledge is and imagine what could be done is much, much important. So we have to consider knowledge as a facility. So as a facility, it should be accessible, it should be usable. This is my message. Thanks a lot for you to participate to this presentation.